A selfless act from a woman who once served her country but now lives in her car. A struggling farmer's chance encounter with the person who would change his family's legacy. A rural community's fate unexpectedly tied to an equipment breakdown on the coldest night of winter. This is the remarkable true story of how Maya Johnson's mechanical expertise and unwavering spirit transformed not just her own circumstances, but the destiny of an entire farming community on the brink of collapse. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The ancient alarm clock blared at 4:45 a.m. Though James Cooper had already been awake for nearly an hour, his mind racing with calculations and concerns. At 42, the third-generation farmer's face showed the weathering of someone who had spent his life battling the elements, the markets, and increasingly corporate agriculture. The Cooper family farm in Meadow Valley had once been the pride of the region, 275 acres of rich soil that had produced bountiful harvests for 3 generations. Now nearly half lay dormant, the irrigation system failing, with grain prices at historic lows and GreenCorp Agriculture's acquisition deadline looming. Just 25 days away, James pulled on his worn work boots and heavy jacket, preparing to face the bitter cold of a Montana winter morning. He headed downstairs, where his father Thomas sat at the kitchen table, glasses perched on his nose, reviewing the latest acquisition offer with its bold corporate letterhead. The kitchen, once filled with the laughter of extended family gatherings, now felt cavernous in its quiet. Photos lining the walls told the story of happier times. James's grandfather breaking ground with the farm's first tractor in 1954. His parents celebrating their biggest harvest. James and his wife Lisa holding their daughter Emma after she won a blue ribbon for her prize calf at the county fair. "Spoke with Anderson again yesterday," Thomas said, his voice carrying the weight of multiple failed negotiations. "GreenCorp won't budge on their timeline. Says the new management is determined to complete the regional integration by quarters end." GreenCorp Agriculture had been systematically acquiring farms throughout Meadow Valley for the past 3 years. What began as friendly offers had gradually transformed into pressure tactics as they consolidated more land. Their massive irrigation infrastructure, drawing from deep aquifers individual farmers couldn't access, created islands of green amid increasingly parched landscapes. "Maybe I can find some extra machinery repair jobs," James offered. His mechanical skills had always provided supplementary income when harvests were lean. The Hendersons need their combine fixed before spring, and the Wilsons mentioned their tractors giving them trouble. Thomas's weathered face showed a hint of pride beneath. "The worry, you're already working yourself to the bone, son. Between the farm and keeping everyone's equipment running, you barely sleep." As they walked out to begin the day's work, Thomas paused to look over their land in the pale winter light. Fields that once produced abundant harvests now showed the effects of 3 years of drought. Combined with outdated irrigation systems, James had somehow kept functional well beyond their expected lifespan. "Your grandfather used to say Cooper blood carries the soil in it," Thomas reflected. 3 generations have poured their lives into this land." James nodded, having heard the family philosophy throughout his childhood. His grandfather had purchased this land when everyone said the rocky northern section made it a poor investment. His father had expanded during the farm crisis of the 1980s when others were abandoning agriculture. The Coopers had always been innovators, adapters, fighters. But this challenge was different. 3 years of rainfall at less than 35% of historical averages had transformed the landscape. Meadow Valley Reservoir stood at its lowest level in recorded history, and the small farming community around it had begun to wither. From the hill overlooking the valley, the contrast was stark. Struggling family farms alongside vast green corporate operations with industrial irrigation systems. 8 neighboring properties had already been sold to GreenCorp, a division of global agricultural enterprises, systematically buying up distressed properties throughout the region. James drove his pickup past the Peterson place, now sporting a newly installed GreenCorp Agriculture sign. Rebecca Winters, GreenCorp's regional acquisition manager, had visited their kitchen 3 times in the past month, each offer more insistent than the last. "Mr. Cooper, you need to recognize the inevitable," she had said during her last visit, speaking with practiced sympathy as she spread documents across their table. "This drought isn't a temporary anomaly. It's the new climate reality. Small operations like yours simply can't compete with optimized agricultural enterprises. GreenCorp's offer is more than generous considering the circumstances." Thomas had responded firmly. "This land has been in my family for 3 generations. We don't measure its value by the acre." Rebecca had looked at them with what seemed like genuine regret. "Your family has a remarkable legacy here, but legacies need to adapt to survive. Sometimes honoring your ancestors means knowing when to make difficult but necessary transitions." The latest offer lay unopened in Thomas's desk, 25% higher than the previous one, with a legacy consultation provision that would allow him to remain in an advisory capacity for 2 years. The deadline 25 days away, the same as when their bank loan would come due. By midday, dark clouds had gathered on the northern horizon. The Weather Service had been predicting the season's worst storm system for days, and the farmers of Meadow Valley were divided between hoping for drought-relieving snow and fearing crop-damaging ice. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Storms coming in faster than they said," Thomas observed as they worked to secure loose equipment. "Better finish the south field irrigation repair before it hits." James nodded, grabbing his tools. The ancient irrigation system had developed yet another leak, and every drop of water was precious. As he worked, he found himself wondering how many more repairs he would make on this land before it was no longer theirs to tend. The first snowflakes began to fall as James tightened the final connection. By the time he reached his truck, the snow had thickened considerably, visibility dropping rapidly as the winter storm enveloped the landscape. Little did James know that this storm would bring more than just snow and ice to their struggling farm. As he drove slowly back toward the main road, headlights on full against the growing darkness, his life was about to intersect with someone whose presence would change everything in ways no one could have anticipated. The snow fell in thick curtains as James's truck crawled along the county road, headlights barely penetrating the white void ahead. Radio warnings of hazardous conditions and potential power outages crackled through the speakers as James navigated the familiar route with tense concentration. The temperature had dropped dramatically, and ice was beginning to form beneath the snow, making each mile increasingly treacherous. He was about 2 miles from home when his headlights caught something unusual through the swirling snow. The outline of a person moving alongside the road, hunched against the driving wind and carrying what looked like a heavy backpack. In these conditions, and this far from town, a pedestrian could quickly become a casualty of the storm. James slowed his truck and rolled down his window. "Hey there, you need a ride?" he called out. The figure turned toward his headlights. A woman, he could now see, wearing a military-style jacket crusted with snow. She approached the truck cautiously. "Anywhere out of this storm would be appreciated," she replied, her voice carrying the crisp authority of someone used to giving orders, though tempered now with evident exhaustion. "Hop in," James said, pushing open the passenger door. "Nobody should be on foot in weather like this." The woman climbed in, bringing with her a blast of frigid air and the distinct smell of motor oil. She set a heavy backpack at her feet. Not a backpack at all, James realized, but a worn toolbox. She was perhaps in her late 30s, with dark hair streaked with premature silver pulled back in a practical ponytail, and the alert, assessing gaze of someone who had seen more than her share of difficult situations. "Maya Johnson," she said, extending a gloved hand. "Thanks for stopping." "James Cooper," he replied, putting the truck back in gear. "Heading somewhere specific or just trying to get out of the storm?" "Just passing through," Maya answered, warming her hands in front of the heater vent. "Was trying to make it to the next town before the storm hit, but it came in faster than expected." James nodded, focusing on the treacherous road. "That's Meadow Valley for you. Weather forecasts are more like suggestions than predictions around here." As they drove slowly through the worsening conditions, James noticed Maya studying the landscape with professional interest despite the limited visibility. "You're a long way from anywhere," he observed. "Car trouble?" A flicker of something, pride, perhaps, or caution, crossed Maya's face. "You could say that. I've been moving around, looking for work, mechanical work primarily." She gestured to the toolbox at her feet. "Military trained. 10 years as a helicopter mechanic, 3 tours overseas." James glanced at her with new respect. "Army?" "Marines," she corrected. "Discharged 4 years ago." There was clearly more to that story, but James didn't press. The immediate problem was getting somewhere safe before the storm made travel impossible. As if punctuating his thought, the truck's engine made an ominous sound, and the vehicle lurched momentarily. Maya's head turned sharply toward the dashboard. "How long has it been making that noise?" James grimaced. "Couple of weeks. Haven't had time to look at it properly. Just been trying to keep the farm equipment running." "Sounds like your fuel. Filters clogging up. Probably ice in the line given this temperature." Her assessment was matter-of-fact, professional. Before James could respond, the engine coughed again, and the truck began to lose power, slowing despite his foot on the accelerator. With practiced skill, he guided the faltering vehicle to the side of the road before it died completely. "Well, that's not good timing," he muttered, trying the ignition again with no success. Maya was already reaching for her toolbox. "Pop the hood. I'll take a look." "In this?" James gestured to the intensifying storm outside. "We should call for help." He pulled out his phone, finding the expected lack of signal. Or not. "It's probably something simple," Maya insisted, zipping her jacket higher. "I've worked in worse conditions." The determination in her voice brooked no argument. James popped the hood, and they both stepped out into the storm, the bitter cold immediately biting through their clothing. Maya moved to the front of the truck with the practiced efficiency of someone who had performed such tasks countless times before. Despite the driving snow and numbing cold, her hands moved with confident precision as she examined the engine. "Just as I thought," she called over the wind. "Fuel filters iced up, and there's a split in one of your fuel lines. I can rig something temporary to get us moving, but you'll need proper repairs soon." James watched in amazement as Maya worked in the harsh conditions, her movements economical and sure despite the circumstances. Within 15 minutes, she had created a bypass for the damaged line and was clearing ice from the filter system. "Try it now," she instructed, closing the hood. The truck started on the second attempt, the engine running rough but functional. They climbed back inside, both shivering from the exposure. "That was impressive," James said with genuine admiration. "Where did you learn to work like that in these conditions?" Maya rubbed her hands together, her expression unreadable. "Kandahar, winter of 2014. Try keeping helicopters operational during a sandstorm that turns to freezing rain. After that, this is practically a workshop environment." As they continued toward the Cooper farm, now moving slowly but steadily through the storm, James found himself curious about his unexpected passenger. "So you're looking for mechanical work?" Not much opportunity around here, especially this time of year. I go where the road takes me, Maya replied, her tone suggesting the conversation had ventured into territory she preferred to avoid. Been that way since my discharge. The evasiveness in her answer, combined with the worn state of her clothing and the way she had been walking along a remote road in a blizzard, painted a picture James was beginning to understand. He'd read enough about veteran homelessness to recognize the signs, but knew better than to confront her directly. "Well, you're welcome to wait out the storm at our place," he offered instead. "Least I can do after that roadside repair." The farmhouse came into view, lights glowing warmly through the swirling snow. Even in the near whiteout conditions, the Cooper property had a presence, the two-story farmhouse standing solid against the elements, flanked by a weathered barn and equipment sheds, all testament to generations of perseverance. As they pulled up to the house, Thomas appeared on the porch, concern evident in his posture as he watched the faltering truck approach. "Engine trouble?" he called as they climbed out. "Fuel line split," James explained. "Would have been stuck out there if not for Maya here. She's a mechanic, fixed it roadside in the middle of the storm." And Thomas extended a hand to Maya. "Thomas Cooper, mighty grateful to you. Nobody should be out in weather like this." "Maya Johnson," she replied, shaking his hand firmly. "Your son was kind enough to offer shelter until the storm passes." Of course, Thomas said, ushering them inside. "Any friend of James is welcome here." The warmth of the farmhouse enveloped them as they entered, the smell of coffee and wood smoke creating an immediate contrast to the bitter cold. Outside, the kitchen, with its large wooden table and well-worn furnishings, spoke of a home that had witnessed generations of family life. "Dad, Maya's a Marine veteran," James explained as Thomas bustled about pouring coffee. "Helicopter mechanic. Fixed the truck when I couldn't even get a signal to call for help." "Marines? My brother was a Marine," Thomas said, his face lighting up. "Served in Vietnam. Never talked much about it, but carried those years with him his whole life." Maya accepted the offered coffee with a nod of thanks. "It stays with you," she agreed simply. As they warmed up, Emma, James's 14-year-old daughter, appeared from the living room, curious about the visitor. With her mother teaching at the county high school and often unable to return home during severe weather, Emma had grown up with the resilience typical of farm children, comfortable with the unexpected. "Emma, this is Maya," James introduced. "She's a mechanic who just saved your dad from being stranded in the blizzard." "Cool," Emma said with typical teenage brevity, but her eyes showed genuine interest. "Like cars and stuff?" "Helicopters, actually," Maya replied, her expression softening slightly. "But I can fix pretty much anything with an engine." "Dad says our tractor's alternator is shot," Emma said, seizing on this information. "He's been trying to find parts for, forever." James gave his daughter a look that suggested this wasn't the time, but Maya's interest was piqued. "What model?" she asked. "An old Farmel M," Thomas answered. "Been in the family since my father's time. Parts are getting harder to find every year." "Mind if I take a look once the storm passes?" Maya offered. "I might have some ideas." James and Thomas exchanged glances. The unexpected arrival of someone with Maya's skills seemed almost too coincidental, given their ongoing equipment struggles. But before they could discuss it further, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the house into darkness, except for the glow from the wood stove. "Power's gone," Thomas sighed, reaching for the emergency lanterns they kept ready. "Might be out for a while with this storm." As the family moved with practiced efficiency to establish alternative lighting and check that the backup generator was functioning for essential systems, Maya observed with the quiet assessment of someone accustomed to evaluating new environments. There was something about the Cooper farm that stirred unexpected emotions, Perhaps the evident pride despite struggling circumstances, or the generations of family history visible in every corner. Later, as the storm raged outside and the family gathered around the table for a simple but hearty dinner prepared on the wood stove, conversation turned to the farm's challenges. In the warm glow of lantern light, Thomas and James explained the situation they faced: the prolonged drought, the failing equipment they couldn't afford to replace, and the corporate pressure to sell before their bank loan came due. GreenCorp's been buying up farms all through the valley, Thomas explained. Started with friendly offers, but as they've gained control of more land and water rights, the tactics have changed. They've established a regional headquarters about 20 miles from here, James added. Their CEO, Victor Reynolds, flies in every month to review acquisitions. Word is he's planning to turn Meadow Valley into the showpiece of their agricultural modernization initiative. Maya listened intently, asking occasional pointed questions that revealed a sharp understanding of both mechanics and business. "And your bank's not offering any extension options?" Thomas shook his head. Meadow Valley Bank was acquired by National Agri-Finance last year. New management, new policies. They see more profit potential in working with GreenCorp than supporting family farms. As the evening progressed, Maya revealed little about her own circumstances, deftly turning questions back to farm operations or mechanical issues. But her expertise became increasingly evident as she discussed potential solutions to some of their equipment problems. The irrigation system you described sounds like it could be modified to improve efficiency by at least 30%, with some relatively simple adjustments, she suggested. "I worked on similar water management systems during drought conditions overseas. By the time they prepared sleeping arrangements for their unexpected guest in the farm's spare room, James found himself wondering if the storm that had seemed like yet another challenge might actually have brought an unexpected opportunity to their doorstep. Morning revealed a transformed landscape, brilliant white and silent beneath a clear blue sky. The storm had deposited nearly 2 feet of snow overnight, creating both beauty and practical challenges for the day ahead. James woke early as usual, finding Maya already in the kitchen, studying the farm's old irrigation blueprints that Thomas had brought out the night before. "Hope you don't mind," she said, looking up from her work. "Your father mentioned these when we were talking, and I wanted to see if my ideas might be viable." "Not at all," James replied, impressed by her initiative. "Any insights would be welcome." Over breakfast, Maya outlined several modifications that could significantly improve their water efficiency with minimal investment. Adaptations of techniques she'd helped implement for remote military installations in water-scarce regions. Her explanations were precise, practical, and demonstrated an impressive grasp of both the mechanical challenges and the specific conditions of the Cooper farm. "I'd be happy to help implement some of these while I'm here," she offered. "Least I can do for the shelter during the storm." There was something in her phrasing, "while I'm here," that suggested impermanence, the habit of someone who hadn't stayed in one place for long. Yet her engagement with their problems seemed genuine, going beyond mere repayment for a night's lodging. "That would be incredible," James said sincerely. "But we can't ask you to work for free. We may be struggling, but we still pay for honest work." A flash of something, pride perhaps, or the shadow of recent hardship, crossed Maya's face. "Let's start with the tractor's alternator and go from there," she suggested, deftly sidestepping the issue of payment. After clearing paths to the equipment barn, James led Maya to the venerable farmall tractor that had been part of Cooper Farm operations for decades. Emma joined them, ostensibly to help, but clearly fascinated by their visitor. "This is a classic," Maya commented, running her hand appreciatively over the tractor's worn but well-maintained body. "They built these to last." Grandfather always said it had a soul, Emma offered. Is that weird? Not at all, Maya replied with the first genuine smile James had seen from her. The best machines develop personalities. Ask any pilot about their aircraft. As Maya began her assessment of the alternator, her movements took on a different quality. Confident, almost reverent. This wasn't just mechanical work, it was craftsmanship. She explained each step to Emma, who absorbed the information with unexpected interest. "Hand me that socket wrench?" Maya asked, and Emma quickly complied, clearly enjoying being treated as a capable assistant rather than a child. James watched the interaction with surprise and gratitude. Emma had struggled since her mother had taken the teaching position that kept her away during the week, a necessary financial decision, but one that had left an emotional gap. Seeing his daughter engaged and learning brought an unexpected lightness to his heart amid their many challenges. By midday, Maya had not only diagnosed the alternator problem, but had ingeniously adapted parts from their supply shed to create a functioning replacement that she promised would last until proper parts could be obtained. That's impressive, Thomas acknowledged when he came to check their progress. Haven't seen that tractor run so smooth in years. The alternator was just the start, Maya explained, wiping grease from her hands. Your fuel injection system needs adjustment, and there's a hydraulic issue that's causing unnecessary strain on the engine. You can tell all that just from listening to it run? Emma asked, wide-eyed. Maya nodded. Machines talk if you know how to listen. Like people, they tell you when something's wrong if you pay attention to the signs. As they worked through the afternoon, Maya methodically addressed one equipment issue after another, making repairs and improvements that would have cost thousands at a service center. Her skills clearly went beyond standard mechanical training, demonstrating an innovative approach to problem solving that James recognized as rare and valuable. During a break, while Emma had gone inside to help Thomas prepare dinner, James finally asked the question that had been on his mind since finding Maya walking along the road. So, where are you actually headed? You mentioned looking for work, but you're clearly qualified for positions better than itinerant repairs. Maya was silent for a long moment, her focus seemingly on cleaning a tool. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost some of its confident edge. Transitioning to civilian. Life hasn't been straightforward, she admitted. After 10 years in the Marines, everything felt wrong. Too quiet, too unstructured, too meaningless. She set down the tool, meeting James's gaze directly for the first time. I tried the conventional route, job at a commercial airline maintenance. Facility, good pay, benefits, but the nightmares got worse. Couldn't sleep, started missing shifts. Eventually, they let me go, and after that, she shrugged. It's been easier to keep moving, pick up work where I can find it, stay until the restlessness takes over again. And your family? James asked gently. Lost my mom while I was deployed. Dad remarried, moved to Florida. We talk sometimes, but he doesn't really understand. Her tone suggested this was putting it mildly. No spouse, no kids. The core was my family for a long time. The simplicity with which she described her isolation struck James deeply. Here was someone who had served her country for a decade, who possessed extraordinary skills, reduced to walking highways in winter storms, looking for temporary work. How long since you've had stable housing? He asked, suspecting he already knew the answer. Maya's expression closed slightly. I manage. Sleep in my car when necessary. There's a network of veteran-friendly people who help out. It's a choice, not a tragedy. But James had seen her car nowhere in the vicinity where he'd picked her up, and her defensiveness told its own story. Before he could respond, Thomas called them in for dinner, and the moment for further questions passed. That evening, as another storm system approached, bringing the promise of additional snow, the mood in the farmhouse was noticeably lighter than it had been in months. Maya's mechanical interventions had already made tangible improvements to their operation, and her proposed irrigation modifications offered hope for addressing one of their most critical challenges. As they discussed next steps, the radio crackled. With a special weather advisory, the new storm would be followed by record-low temperatures, creating potentially dangerous conditions for the next several days. "Roads probably won't be cleared until midweek," Thomas noted, looking at Maya. "You're welcome to stay as long as needed. In fact, given everything you've done for us already, we'd be grateful if you'd consider staying through the week. We could use your help and we'll make it worth your while." The offer hung in the air, representing more than just temporary employment. It was an acknowledgement of value, of belonging, if only for a short time. Maya's hesitation was visible, the tension between the safety of continued movement and the risk of temporary connection. "I could help implement those irrigation modifications," she said finally, "and there's that hydraulic issue on your combine to address." It wasn't exactly acceptance, but it wasn't refusal either. James recognized it as the response of someone unaccustomed to making plans beyond the immediate future, someone for whom commitment of any kind represented vulnerability. "One day at a time," he offered, understanding in his voice. "No pressure." Maya nodded, a silent agreement to this approach. Later that night, after everyone had retired to their rooms, James stood at the window watching the new snow begin to fall. The farm that had seemed to be slipping from his family's grasp just days ago now felt somehow different. Not saved, certainly, but infused with a new energy, a sense of possibility that had been absent for too long. The appearance of Maya Johnson, skilled, troubled, resilient, in the middle of a blizzard, seemed almost providential, yet the transient nature of her life meant this reprieve might be as temporary as the snow. Outside, the thickening flakes transformed the landscape once again, covering the tracks of yesterday with new possibilities for tomorrow. In the stillness of the house, with his family and their unexpected guests safely sheltered from the storm, James allowed himself to hope. Not for miracles, but for enough time. Time for Maya to complete the work she'd started. Time to implement her ideas for the irrigation system. Perhaps even time to help her find something she seemed to have, lost along with her military career, a sense of purpose. Little did he know that events were already in motion that would transform not just the Cooper farm, but the entire Meadow Valley community in ways no one could have anticipated. The next 2 weeks would bring challenges and opportunities beyond anything they had imagined, beginning with what would arrive on their property just days later. The transformation began quietly, almost imperceptibly, in the days following Maya's arrival at the Cooper farm. What had started as emergency shelter from a storm evolved into a partnership that grew stronger with each equipment repair and system improvement. Maya's temporary presence took on a sense of purpose that neither she nor the Cooper family had anticipated. 5 days after the blizzard, with roads finally cleared enough for travel, James expected Maya might announce her departure. Instead, she was in the equipment barn before dawn, meticulously drafting modifications to the irrigation system using paper salvaged from old feed supply invoices. "These pumps can be reconfigured to reduce water consumption by nearly 40%, she explained when James joined her, spreading the detailed drawings across a workbench. "The technology's similar to systems we developed for forward operating bases in Afghanistan. Maximum efficiency with minimal resources." James studied the plans with growing excitement. "This could change everything for us, Maya. With water, restrictions tightening every season, this kind of efficiency would put us ahead of the curve." "It's not just about survival," Maya replied, her usual reserve softening slightly. "It's about sustainability, creating systems that work with the environment instead of depleting it." Something in her voice suggested this philosophy extended beyond farm equipment, perhaps to her own life as well. The restlessness that had characterized her first days at the farm had gradually diminished, replaced by focused engagement with each new project she undertook. Together, they began implementing her irrigation modifications, salvaging parts from abandoned equipment and repurposing materials with ingenuity born of necessity. Maya worked with tireless precision, teaching James techniques she'd developed during her military service. Emma became a constant shadow, absorbing Maya's knowledge with remarkable aptitude. "You've got a natural mechanical intuition," Maya told the teenager as they calibrated a pressure valve together. "Not something that can be taught. Either you have it or you don't." Emma beamed at the rare compliment. "Mom says I should focus on academics if I want options beyond farming. Says mechanical work is too unstable." "Balance is key," Maya responded thoughtfully. "My technical education saved me when other things fell apart. Having multiple skills means having multiple paths forward." By the end of the first week, Maya had not only transformed the farm's irrigation approach, but had repaired 3 tractors, the combine, and numerous smaller pieces of equipment. What would have cost the Coopers thousands in service fees and replacement parts had been accomplished through her expertise and innovative adaptations. Thomas, initially reserved in his assessment of their visitor, became an enthusiastic supporter. "That woman has magic in her hands," he declared after watching Maya resurrect a generator everyone had written off years ago. "Haven't seen mechanical intuition like that since your grandfather." The practical improvements were undeniable, but equally significant was the shift in atmosphere at the Cooper farm. Where resignation and worry had prevailed, a cautious optimism began to emerge. Each repair, each system improvement represented not just immediate savings, but increased future viability. On the 8th day, as Maya and James were finishing the main irrigation modifications, the distinctive sound of helicopter rotors cut through the clear winter air. Looking up, they spotted a sleek, black helicopter approaching from the direction of town, its path clearly leading to the Cooper property. "Are you expecting visitors?" Maya asked, instinctively stepping back toward the barn's shadow, her body language shifting to alertness. James shook his head, watching the aircraft circle, once before settling into a landing pattern on the flat field adjacent to the main house. "That's a private executive helicopter. Nobody around here has that kind of transportation." They watched as the helicopter touched down with precision, its rotors slowing as the door opened to reveal a man in an expensive overcoat, followed by a woman James recognized immediately, Rebecca Winters, GreenCorp's acquisition manager. "That's Victor Reynolds," James said grimly, identifying the man by his confident bearing and the company logo emblazoned on the helicopter. "CEO of GreenCorp. Looks like they're not waiting for us to respond to their latest offer." Maya's expression hardened, her military bearing becoming more pronounced. "Want me to make myself scarce?" "No," James replied firmly. "You're part of this farm now, at least for the moment. Besides, I could use the moral support." They walked together to meet the unexpected visitors, Thomas and Emma joining them from the house. The contrast was stark. The Cooper family in well-worn work clothes standing opposite Reynolds in his tailored overcoat and Italian leather boots unsuited for farm conditions. "Mr. Cooper," Reynolds greeted them, his smile practiced and confident. "I apologize for the unannounced visit, but I was in the region reviewing our Meadow Valley operations and wanted to personally discuss our acquisition proposal." "Mr. Reynolds," Thomas acknowledged, his tone carefully neutral. "This is my son James, my granddaughter Emma, and our associate Maya Johnson." Reynolds barely glanced at Maya, his attention focused on the senior Cooper. "I understand," You haven't responded to our latest offer. I thought perhaps we could discuss any concerns directly. We've been reviewing our options, Thomas replied evenly. Recent improvements to our operation have changed our perspective on the farm's viability. Rebecca Winters stepped forward, tablet in hand. We've prepared some projections based on historical weather patterns and water availability that you might find illuminating. Her tone was professional, but carried an undercurrent of condescension. The data strongly suggests that independent operations like yours face insurmountable challenges in the coming years. Perhaps your data needs updating, Maya interjected, speaking for the first time. The Cooper farm has implemented water conservation technology that reduces consumption by approximately 40% while maintaining optimal soil hydration. Reynolds turned toward Maya with evident surprise, reassessing her presence. And you are Maya Johnson, mechanical engineer specializing in resource optimization in challenging environments. The precision of her self-description, delivered with military crispness, caused a flicker of uncertainty in Reynolds' expression. He clearly hadn't expected to encounter technical expertise on a struggling family farm. Ms. Johnson, while conservation efforts are commendable, the reality remains that climate projections for this region indicate— I'm familiar with the projections, Maya interrupted, her voice level but authoritative. I'm also familiar with adaptive technologies developed for environments significantly more challenging than Montana. The modifications implemented here are just the beginning of what's possible. James watched this exchange with amazement. Maya, who had been so reticent about her background and capabilities, was now facing down a corporate CEO with the confidence of someone accustomed to high-stakes confrontations. Reynolds studied Maya more carefully. You're not from around here. No, sir. Marine Corps, formerly stationed at Al-Assad, Kandahar, and 3 other bases. Specialized in mechanical systems optimization in resource-constrained environments. Recognition dawned in Reynolds' eyes. Military engineering, interesting background for agricultural applications. The principles are consistent across contexts, Maya replied. Maximize efficiency, minimize waste, maintain operational integrity under adverse conditions. A new calculation seemed to be taking place behind Reynolds' practiced expression. He turned back to Thomas. Mr. Cooper, I'd be interested in seeing these modifications Ms. Johnson mentioned. Perhaps we could discuss how they might affect our valuation of your property. What followed was an unexpected tour of the Cooper farm, with Maya methodically demonstrating the innovations she'd implemented. James watched Reynolds' reaction shift from polite interest to genuine engagement as he recognized the sophisticated engineering principles applied to seemingly simple farm systems. This pressure distribution approach, Reynolds observed as, Maya explained, a key component of the irrigation system. It's similar to techniques being developed at our research facility, but you've implemented it with remarkably low-cost materials. Necessity drives innovation, Maya replied. In combat zones, you work with what's available. By the time they returned to the main house, the dynamic had subtly shifted. Reynolds was no longer the corporate authority delivering an inevitable verdict, but a businessman recognizing unexpected value. Thomas, James, he said as they gathered in the kitchen, I'd like to propose a different conversation than the one I came here to have. GreenCorp's interest in Meadow Valley extends beyond land acquisition. We're developing our sustainable agriculture division, focusing on drought-resistant farming techniques. Rebecca Winters looked momentarily confused by this deviation from their planned approach, but quickly adjusted, pulling up different documents on her tablet. The technologies Ms. Johnson has implemented here, Reynolds continued, particularly the water conservation systems, align with research directions we're exploring, though our approach has been more conventional in terms of investment. Meaning expensive, Maya commented. Reynolds acknowledged this with a slight nod. Corporate R&D tends to prioritize technological sophistication over cost efficiency. What you've accomplished here suggests an alternative pathway that might be particularly relevant for smaller agricultural operations. Thomas and James exchanged glances, uncertain where this was leading. I'd like to propose a collaborative arrangement, Reynolds said. Rather than acquiring your property outright, GreenCorp would provide capital investment for further development of these conservation technologies, with the Cooper Farm serving as a demonstration site. You would maintain ownership and operational control, while we would gain insights valuable for our broader agricultural initiatives. The proposal hung in the air, unexpected and complex in its implications. What had begun as a corporate takeover attempt was morphing into something entirely different, a potential partnership that might preserve the Cooper legacy while providing the financial stability they desperately needed. We'd need to review the details carefully, Thomas said cautiously. Our priority is maintaining family ownership of this land. Of course, Reynolds agreed. Ms. Winters can prepare a preliminary framework for your consideration. He turned to Maya and Ms. Johnson. I'd be very interested in discussing your potential involvement in this project on a consulting basis. Your expertise clearly bridges military and agricultural applications in ways that could be valuable beyond the Cooper Farm. Maya's expression remained carefully neutral. My current commitment is to completing the systems here. Of course, Reynolds replied smoothly. But should you be interested in extending that work more broadly, GreenCorp would be prepared to offer appropriate compensation and resources. After the visitors departed, promising to return with formal proposal, documents within days, the Cooper family and Maya gathered around the kitchen table to process this unexpected development. What just happened? James asked, still trying to absorb the complete reversal of their situation. This morning, we were facing foreclosure, and now GreenCorp wants to invest in our farm as a demonstration site. They recognized value they hadn't seen before, Thomas said, glancing at Maya with undisguised appreciation. Thanks to you. Maya shook her head. I just implemented practical solutions to obvious problems. Reynolds is smart enough to recognize efficiency when he sees it. It's good business. But why the change of heart? Emma asked. They've been trying to buy us out for months. It's not a change of heart, Maya explained. It's a change of strategy. GreenCorp needs to demonstrate sustainable approaches as climate pressures increase. They could spend millions developing systems in laboratories, or they could invest in proven field applications like what we've implemented here. It's still about profit, just with a longer view. James studied Maya thoughtfully. Her ability to translate between military experience, mechanical engineering, and now corporate strategy revealed layers of capability she had carefully kept hidden. You've done this kind of negotiation before, haven't you? A shadow crossed Maya's face. Part of my role involved liaison with civilian contractors and local governments. Understanding motivations and finding mutual benefits was essential for successful operations. The following days brought intense activity as the Cooper family prepared for GreenCorp's return. Maya worked relentlessly to complete additional system improvements, documenting each modification with the precision of a military operation report. Her technical drawings and efficiency calculations created a compelling portfolio of innovations. James found her in the barn late one evening, still working despite the exhaustion evident in her posture. You should rest, he said gently. You've done more in 2 weeks than most could accomplish in months. Maya looked up from her drawings, her expression uncharacteristically vulnerable. I need to make sure everything's ready, properly documented. Your family's future depends on making this partnership work. Our family's future, James corrected her. You're part of what's happening here, Maya. These are your innovations, your vision. She shook her head slightly. I'm just passing through, James. Always have been. It doesn't have to be that way, he said carefully. What you've created here, it's not just mechanical systems. It's a foundation for something meaningful, something lasting. Maya's hands stilled on the drawings. I haven't stayed anywhere for more than a few weeks since my discharge. The restlessness always comes back, the feeling that I don't belong in civilian spaces. And now? James asked. These past 2 weeks? She considered the question with the same thoughtfulness she applied to mechanical problems. It's been different. The work has purpose, clear objectives, tangible results. Like a mission, James suggested. Yes, she acknowledged, like a mission. The parallel seemed to offer her a framework for understanding her own experience. The Cooper farm as a deployment of sorts, with defined goals and measurable outcomes. Yet James sensed there was more to her engagement than mission parameters. The way she had connected with Emma, her patient explanations to Thomas, her increasingly comfortable presence in their family rhythms, these suggested something deeper than professional commitment. Before James could pursue this further, the sound of vehicles approaching broke the evening quiet. Through the barn door, they could see headlights coming up the long driveway, not the expected corporate representatives, but 3 pickup trucks, bearing the logos of neighboring farms. What's happening? Maya asked, immediately alert. I'm not sure, James replied, equally puzzled as they walked out to meet the unexpected visitors. The lead truck parked, and Bill Henderson stepped out, owner of the largest family farm still operating independently in Meadow Valley. James, he called, heard you had some interesting visitors today. Word travels fast. News about Victor. Reynolds' helicopter would definitely make the rounds, James acknowledged. What brings you all out here tonight? As the other farmers gathered around, the Wilsons, the Pattersons, the Mendez family, Bill explained, we've been hearing things, that GreenCorp is changing tactics, talking about partnerships instead of acquisitions, that there's some kind of water conservation technology being developed right here that could change the game for all of us. James glanced at Maya, who had instinctively stepped back, uncomfortable with the sudden attention. It's true. We've implemented some significant improvements to our irrigation systems that reduce water consumption substantially. Word is, another farmer interjected, you've got some kind of military engineer behind it all. The group's attention shifted to Maya, standing slightly apart. James saw her tense at being the focus of multiple strangers. This is Maya Johnson, he said simply, former Marine Corps mechanic and the person responsible for the innovations you're hearing about. Bill Henderson stepped forward, extending his hand to Maya. Ma'am, my son served 2 tours in Iraq. Anything you've done for the Coopers, you've done for all of us. These corporate operations have been squeezing family farms out one by one. If you found a way to level the playing field, we'd be mighty interested in learning more. The sincerity in his voice seemed to reach Maya. She shook his hand firmly. The systems are designed to be replicable, with standard farm equipment and minimal specialized components. They could be adapted to most operations in the valley. What followed was an impromptu gathering in the Cooper barn, with Maya reluctantly but methodically explaining the basic principles behind her water conservation approach. The farmers listened with intense focus, asking practical questions that reflected generations of agricultural knowledge. This could work across the entire valley, Wilson observed, studying Maya's diagrams. If enough farms implemented these systems, it would fundamentally change the water usage dynamics that GreenCorp has been exploiting. That's the idea, Maya confirmed. It's not about competing with corporate agriculture on their terms. It's about changing the parameters of the game entirely. As the evening progressed, a new energy emerged among the gathered farmers, a sense of possibility that had been absent for too long. The conversation expanded from technical details to broader community implications, the potential for collective action rather than individual survival. If GreenCorp is willing to partner with the Coopers, Henderson reasoned, they might be open to similar arrangements with other farms, especially if we present a unified approach. By the time the impromptu meeting concluded, a framework for community action had begun to take shape. The farmers would meet again in 2 days after the Coopers received GreenCorp's formal proposal to develop a coordinated response that might benefit the entire valley. As the trucks departed and quiet returned to the farm, Maya stood in a barn doorway, watching the headlights disappear down the driveway. "You did something important tonight," James told her, coming to stand beside her. "They did," Maya corrected him. "They recognized the opportunity and immediately thought beyond individual benefit. That's rare." "It started with you," James insisted. "The technical innovations, yes, but more than that, you showed what's possible when specialized knowledge meets practical needs." Maya was silent for a moment, her gaze fixed on the distant lights of Meadow Valley. "In the military, we had a saying, mission success depends on force multiplication. One unit can accomplish only so much, but when resources and knowledge are effectively shared across multiple units, the impact increases exponentially." James nodded, understanding the parallel she was drawing. "That's exactly what happened. Tonight, your knowledge becomes more valuable when multiplied across all these farms. If GreenCorp is serious about their sustainable agriculture initiative," Maya continued, her strategic mind clearly working through the implications, "a valley-wide implementation would provide them with comprehensive data across varied conditions. It's actually a better business model than isolated demonstration sites." The practical logic of her assessment was characteristic, but James sensed something else beneath it, a growing investment in outcomes beyond the immediate technical challenges. Maya was beginning to envision a future for Meadow Valley, one in which her contributions might create lasting change. As they walked back to the house together, the winter night crisp and clear around them, James felt a profound shift in their shared reality. 2 weeks ago, he had been a struggling farmer facing the loss of his family legacy, and Maya had been a homeless veteran walking a lonely road. Now they stood at the center of a potential transformation that extended far beyond either of their individual circumstances. The irony wasn't lost on James, that someone society had effectively discarded, a veteran reduced to transient existence, despite exceptional skills, might become the catalyst for saving not just his family farm, but an entire agricultural community. Maya's journey from roadside stranger to community asset represented something profound about overlooked potential and the unpredictable paths to redemption. Inside the farmhouse, Thomas and Emma waited with questions about the impromptu gathering, eager to understand what had transpired. As Maya explained the farmers' reactions and the emerging possibility of a coordinated approach, her usual reserve gave way to genuine engagement. For perhaps the first time since her arrival, she spoke of future possibilities with something approaching personal investment. "If the valley-wide implementation proves successful," she explained, spreading her diagrams across the kitchen table, "it could serve as a model for other agricultural communities facing similar water challenges. The impact could extend well beyond Meadow Valley." Thomas watched her with knowing eyes. "Sounds like a mission worth undertaking," he observed quietly. Maya looked up, meeting his gaze with newfound clarity. "Yes," she agreed simply. "I believe it is." Later that night, as the Cooper household settled into sleep, Maya stood at the window of her temporary room, watching snowflakes begin to fall again, gentle and unhurried. The restlessness that had driven her for years, the sense of disconnection from civilian life, had gradually subsided during her time at the farm. In its place was something unfamiliar yet unmistakable, a sense of belonging, of purpose, extending beyond the immediate task. The helicopter engineer, who had maintained complex machinery in combat zones, had found unexpected healing in the basic systems of a family farm. The veteran who couldn't adjust to civilian employment had discovered a mission that bridged her military expertise with the community's desperate need. And the woman who had been sleeping in her car just weeks ago now stood at the center of negotiations that might determine the future of an entire valley. As the snow continued to fall, transforming the landscape once again, Maya allowed herself to consider a possibility she had long since abandoned, that she might have found in this unlikely place a home. The morning of GreenCorp's formal proposal presentation dawned clear and cold, the kind of crystalline winter day that painted Meadow Valley in stark contrasts of brilliant white snow and deep blue sky. Maya had been awake for hours, making final adjustments to her documentation and reviewing the technical specifications of her irrigation innovations. The meticulous attention to detail that had served her through military deployments now focused on ensuring the Cooper family entered negotiations with every possible advantage. James found her in the kitchen at dawn, papers spread across the table, a half-empty coffee cup at her elbow. Something in her posture had changed over the past days. The vigilant tension of someone always prepared to depart had softened into the groundedness of someone invested in outcomes. "You're going to wear out those diagrams," he observed, pouring his own coffee. Maya looked up, a rare smile briefly transforming her serious expression. "In the Marines, we had a saying, proper preparation prevents poor performance. 5 Ps. I thought the military version had 7 Ps, with some colorful language added," James replied with a knowing look. Maya's smile widened slightly. "The unofficial version, yes, not appropriate for civilian settings." This small moment of shared understanding underscored how far they had come from the awkward silence of their first truck ride during the blizzard. The barriers Maya had maintained, necessary protection during years of transient vulnerability, had gradually lowered in the face of genuine connection. Thomas joined them, bringing his own quiet confidence to the moment. At 72, the Senior Cooper had weathered enough agricultural crises to approach this day with tempered expectations. "Whatever happens," he reminded them, "we face it as a family, together." The inclusion of Maya in that statement was implicit but clear, acknowledged in her slight nod of appreciation. By mid-morning, the Cooper farm had transformed into an unexpected hub of activity. The neighboring farmers who had gathered impromptu 2 nights before returned more formally, bringing additional families concerned about Meadow Valley's future. Community leaders arrived. The mayor, the county agricultural extension agent, even the high school principal, all drawn by reports of potential developments that might affect the entire region. "Word travels fast," Maya observed, watching the gathering crowd from the barn doorway. "Rural communities," James explained. "Information is currency, especially when it involves GreenCorp." The arrival of Victor Reynolds' helicopter created a momentary hush across the assembled community. This time, the CEO was accompanied not only by Rebecca Winters, but by a team of specialists, agricultural engineers, sustainability experts, and financial analysts, signaling the seriousness of GreenCorp's interest. Reynolds surveyed the unexpected gathering with sharp assessment. "Quite the audience," he commented to James as they walked from the landing area. "I was expecting a private business discussion." "News travels in small communities," James replied evenly. "These are families with significant interest in any development that might affect regional agricultural practices." Reynolds nodded, his expression calculating but not displeased. Actually, this might streamline certain aspects of our proposal. Ms. Johnson's innovations have applications beyond your individual operation. Inside the farmhouse, now crowded, with representatives from both worlds, corporate agriculture and generational farming, an extraordinary meeting took shape. The kitchen table that had witnessed decades of Cooper family meals and discussions now served as the focal point for negotiations that might determine Meadow Valley's future. Reynolds began with practiced corporate polish. The proposal we've prepared represents a significant departure from GreenCorp's previous approach in this region, he acknowledged, as his team distributed professional documentation packages. Our Sustainable Agriculture Division has identified tremendous potential in the water conservation technologies implemented here at the Cooper farm. Rebecca Winter's advanced slides on a portable projector displaying analytics that quantified the efficiency gains Maya's systems had achieved, data gathered during their previous visit and analyzed by GreenCorp's research team. These results exceed our laboratory projections by approximately 30%, Reynolds continued. More importantly, they've been achieved using primarily standard agricultural equipment with minimal specialized components, making implementation economically viable across diverse operations. The technical presentation that followed was comprehensive, but Maya noticed something significant in the approach. While acknowledging the innovations originated at the Cooper farm, the proposal subtly repositioned them as potential GreenCorp intellectual property through the proposed partnership. When Reynolds finished outlining the financial terms, investment capital, royalty structures, and operational parameters, Maya spoke for the first time, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had impressed even seasoned Marines. The proposal doesn't address community implementation, she observed. These systems were designed specifically for adaptation across varied agricultural operations, particularly those facing water access challenges. Reynolds turned toward her with careful consideration. Ms. Johnson, GreenCorp's initial focus is establishing proof of concept through the Cooper Farm demonstration site. Broader implementation would follow successful validation. The systems have already been validated, Maya countered, rising to unroll her technical drawings across the table. What's needed isn't further proof, but expanded application. She proceeded to outline, with military precision, how the water conservation approach could be implemented valley-wide, creating a network system that would optimize resource utilization across all participating farms. Her presentation wasn't just technically sound, it was strategically brilliant, positioning community-wide implementation as both environmentally superior and financially advantageous. A coordinated approach, she concluded, would provide GreenCorp with comprehensive data across varied conditions and soil types, accelerating your sustainable agriculture research while simultaneously preserving the agricultural heritage of this community. Reynolds studied her with newfound respect. This wasn't the improvised pitch of a mechanical tinkerer, but the comprehensive strategy of someone accustomed to complex operational planning. "You've given this considerable thought," he acknowledged. "It's what I was trained for," Maya replied simply, "maximizing resource efficiency across varied operational conditions while maintaining community stability." Bill Henderson, the neighboring farmer who had first gathered others to hear Maya's ideas, stepped forward. "What Ms. Johnson is proposing aligns with discussions we've been having among Meadow Valley farmers. Instead of piecemeal acquisitions that fragment the community, a coordinated conservation approach would benefit both GreenCorp and independent operators." The mayor of Meadow Valley, a former farmer himself, added his perspective. "The economic impact of preserving family farms extends beyond agriculture. Our schools, businesses, and community institutions depend on maintaining a stable population base." Reynolds listened to these interventions with the calculation of someone reassessing strategic options in real time. When he finally responded, his approach had shifted subtly but significantly. GreenCorp's mandate includes environmental, sustainability and community development alongside profitability, he stated, making eye contact with his executive team. A valley-wide implementation program could potentially serve all these objectives more effectively than our current acquisition strategy. What followed was an extraordinary negotiation. Corporate executives and family farmers finding common ground through Maya's framework. The technical discussions were complex, but the underlying principle was straightforward: water conservation technology that served both corporate interests and community needs. By late afternoon, an unprecedented agreement had taken preliminary shape. GreenCorp would pivot from land acquisition to technology partnership, providing capital investment for implementing Maya's systems across participating farms. The farmers would maintain ownership and operational control while sharing data that would advance GreenCorp's sustainable agriculture research. The Cooper Farm would serve as the central demonstration and training site, with Maya's innovations recognized through a formal patent application that preserved core implementation rights for Meadow Valley operators. As the meeting concluded and participants dispersed into focused discussion groups, Maya found herself momentarily alone in the kitchen, absorbing the magnitude of what had transpired. The technical solutions she had developed to address one family's challenges had catalyzed a fundamental shift in approach for both a major corporation and an entire agricultural community. James joined her, his expression reflecting amazement and gratitude in equal measure. "You just changed the future of Meadow Valley," he said quietly. "Everyone in this community owes you a debt that can't be repaid." Maya shook her head slightly. "I just applied existing principles to observed problems. The community did the rest by recognizing the collective potential." "That modesty might work with others," James replied with gentle insistence. "But I've watched you these past weeks. You didn't just fix equipment or improve irrigation. You envisioned possibilities nobody else could see, then made them tangible enough for others to believe in." Before Maya could respond, Reynolds approached, having extricated himself from conversations with his executive team. His assessment of Maya now carried professional interest beyond the immediate situation. "Ms. Johnson," he began directly, "GreenCorp's Sustainable Agriculture Division would be interested in discussing a formal role for you in this initiative. Your expertise bridges military engineering and agricultural applications in ways our traditional R&D approach hasn't considered." The offer hung in the air between them, unexpected validation of Maya's capabilities from a corporate executive who had initially dismissed her presence. It represented not just employment, but professional recognition of skills that civilian society had previously overlooked. "I'm committed to completing the Cooper Farm implementation," Maya replied carefully. "Beyond that, I'd need to consider my options." Reynolds nodded, respecting her measured response. "Of course, the offer remains open." He handed her a business card with his direct contact information, a small gesture that nonetheless acknowledged her as a professional peer rather than a transient farm helper. As the day progressed into evening and the various contingents departed, corporate representatives to prepare formal documentation, community members to discuss implications with their families, the Cooper household settled into a quieter celebration of their unexpected reprieve. "A month ago, we were counting down to foreclosure," Thomas reflected, his weathered hands cradling a mug of coffee at the kitchen table. "Now we're the demonstration site for an agricultural innovation program that might preserve family farming throughout the valley." "All because you stopped to help a stranded motorist during a blizzard," Emma added, bumping her father's shoulder affectionately. James smiled at his daughter, then looked toward Maya, who stood by the window gazing out at the snow-covered fields, now bathed in sunset light. "No, it's because that stranded motorist had the courage to stop walking away from her own potential." Maya turned at this, her expression uncharacteristically vulnerable. The military reserve that had been her protection for so long had gradually yielded to something more complex. Pride in her contribution, certainly, but also uncertainty about navigating success after years of struggle. "I never expected," she began, then paused, searching for words. "When you found me on that road, I was just trying to make it to the next town, find enough work for a few meals and maybe a night in a motel. The idea that anyone would value my experience beyond basic repairs seemed impossible. Yet here you are," Thomas said gently, "with a corporate CEO offering you a position and an entire community looking to you for solutions." Maya's gaze returned to the window, to the landscape that had somehow become significant to her. "Here I am," she echoed softly. Later that evening, after Thomas and Emma had retired, James found Maya in the barn, methodically organizing her tools, a habit he had come to recognize as her way of processing complex emotions through familiar routines. "Reynolds' offer," he said, leaning against the workbench. "It's a good opportunity." Maya continued her precise arrangement of wrenches. "It is. But you're hesitant." Her hands stilled briefly before resuming their task. "I've been transient for so long, James. The idea of committing to something permanent, becoming visible again. It's complicated. Because of what happened after your discharge?" he asked gently. Maya was silent for a long moment, and James waited, having learned that her trust required patience. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of painful recollection. "After 10 years in the Marines, I thought I understood who I was, my purpose, my place. The transition to civilian life. I wasn't prepared for how completely I would disappear." She turned to face him fully, allowing him to see what she usually kept carefully hidden. The corporate airline job was just the beginning. Each failure compounded until I couldn't face another rejection, another situation where my military experience meant nothing. It became easier to keep moving, stay invisible, take temporary jobs where expectations were low and departures expected. James nodded, understanding more deeply now the magnitude of what had happened during her time at the Cooper farm. "And now you're not invisible anymore. You're at the center of something significant." "Exactly," Maya acknowledged. "It's what I wanted for so long, and now that it's happening, I'm terrified of failing again." "You won't be alone this time," James said simply. "Whatever you decide, whether it's working with GreenCorp, staying here at the farm, or finding some other path, you have people who recognize your value now, including yourself." The truth of this statement seemed to reach something essential in Maya. The woman who had walked alone through winter storms, sleeping in her car and taking whatever temporary work she could find, had indeed found something. Beyond employment at the Cooper farm, she had rediscovered her own capabilities and worth. "I don't have to decide everything tonight," she said finally, a small smile softening her features. "For now, there's still plenty of work to complete here." "One day at a time," James agreed, echoing their earlier understanding. The following days brought intense activity as the framework agreement developed during the meeting transformed into detailed implementation plans. GreenCorp's technical team worked closely with Maya to document her systems for broader application. While participating, farmers began preliminary assessments of their operations. The Cooper farm became the unofficial headquarters for this unexpected collaboration, with Maya conducting training sessions for neighboring farmers in the equipment barn. Her technical expertise was now matched by growing confidence in communicating complex concepts to diverse audiences, a skill that had atrophied during her years of isolation. Emma became her regular assistant, displaying remarkable aptitude for both the mechanical aspects and the interpersonal dynamics of these sessions. The teenager who had been uncertain about her future now moved with purpose, absorbing Maya's knowledge while contributing her own insights about the farm system she had grown up with. "You're a natural teacher," James observed one evening after, watching Maya guide a group of farmers through calibration procedures. "They understand concepts from you that our county extension agent has been trying to explain for years." Maya considered this thoughtfully. In the military, effective training directly impacts mission success and survival. You learn to communicate essential information clearly, adapt to different learning styles, and ensure practical mastery, not just theoretical understanding. Those same principles apply perfectly to agricultural training, James noted, especially with technologies that affect livelihoods. As the implementation plans progressed, Maya found herself increasingly engaged with GreenCorp's technical team, particularly Dr. Sarah Chen, the head of their Sustainable Agriculture Division. What began as professional consultation evolved into mutual respect between women who had navigated male-dominated fields through different but equally challenging paths. "Your approach to water conservation is remarkable," Dr. Chen told Maya during one of their working sessions. "You've achieved with practical field adaptations what our research labs have been pursuing through much more costly methods." "Different constraints produce different solutions," Maya replied. "Military necessity taught me to work with available resources rather than ideal ones." Dr. Chen studied her with professional assessment. "That perspective would be invaluable to our division on a permanent basis. Reynolds mentioned he discussed a position with you." Maya nodded, her response measured. "He did. I'm still considering my options." "Whatever you decide," Dr. Chen said with unexpected candor, "don't underestimate the significance of what you've accomplished here. You've created a model that could transform agricultural practices far beyond Meadow Valley." This external validation from a respected scientist reinforced what Maya had begun to accept, that her contributions represented not just temporary solutions, but potentially lasting impact. The systems she had developed at the Cooper farm were being documented for implementation across Meadow Valley and possibly beyond, creating a legacy that would persist regardless of her personal decisions about the future. 2 weeks after the pivotal meeting, with the formal agreements finalized and implementation beginning on several participating farms, Maya faced a moment she had been avoiding. The road through Meadow Valley had finally been cleared all the way to the adjacent county, making it possible to retrieve the car she had abandoned during the blizzard. James drove her to the small motel at the county line where she had left. Her aged sedan, the vehicle that had been both transportation and shelter during her transient years. The sight of it, partially buried under plowed snow in the motel parking lot, created a strange disconnection in Maya's mind. It belonged to a different version of herself, one that had been gradually receding during her weeks at the Cooper farm. "I can't believe I lived out of that for almost a year," she said quietly as they approached the car. James glanced at her, hearing the shift in perspective implied by her use of past tense. Amazing how quickly circumstances can change. They cleared the snow and jumped the battery, the engine eventually sputtering to life. Maya's few personal possessions remained inside: a duffel bag of clothing, a box of military memorabilia she hadn't been able to abandon, and a folder containing her discharge papers and identification documents. "Follow me back?" James suggested, and Maya nodded, sliding behind the wheel of a vehicle that now felt foreign to her hands. The drive back to the Cooper farm became a journey between worlds. The isolation of her transient existence and the connection she had found in Meadow Valley. With each mile, Maya confronted the decision she had been postponing. whether to reclaim the independence that had been both freedom and prison, or to accept the rootedness that now offered itself. Returning to the farm, parking her battered car beside the equipment barn, where she had created innovations, now valued by corporations and community alike, Maya felt the convergence of past and potential future. The woman who had walked away from failed civilian transitions, who had chosen invisibility as protection against further rejection, now stood at a crossroads of her own making. That evening, as the Cooper family gathered for dinner, Maya finally voiced the decision that had been forming within her. "I've been considering GreenCorp's offer," she began, her tone characteristically measured, "and the possibilities here in Meadow Valley." The family waited, respecting her process. "For the past 4 years, I've been running from failures I couldn't face," Maya continued, "convincing myself that transience was a choice rather than a retreat. What's happened here, the systems we've developed, the community implementation, the GreenCorp partnership, it's created an opportunity I never expected to find." She looked around the table at the faces that had become significant to her. Thomas, with his quiet wisdom, James with his steadfast support, Emma with her emerging confidence. "I've decided to accept a modified version of Reynolds' offer," she explained. "GreenCorp is establishing a regional sustainable agriculture center to support the Meadow Valley implementation. They've asked me to serve as technical director, overseeing the adaptation of these water conservation systems for different agricultural operations." "Maya, that's wonderful," Thomas said warmly. "They couldn't find anyone more qualified." "There's more," she continued. "The position would be based here in Meadow Valley, with the Cooper farm serving as the primary demonstration site. I'd be working directly with participating farms to ensure successful implementation, while continuing to refine the systems based on field performance." James heard the implication immediately. "You'd be staying in Meadow Valley?" Maya nodded, allowing herself a small smile. "If that's acceptable to all of you. The position includes housing allowance, but I've grown rather attached to this farm." "Acceptable?" Emma exclaimed. "It's perfect. You already practically live in the equipment barn anyway." The teenager's enthusiasm broke the formality of the moment, and genuine warmth filled the kitchen as the implications of Maya's decision became clear. The homeless veteran who had arrived during a blizzard had found not just employment, but a place where her skills, experience, and person were valued. "There's something else I want to do," Maya added, her expression growing more serious. "Part of my agreement with GreenCorp includes establishing a veteran training program for agricultural mechanics. Too many veterans struggle with the same transition issues I faced. This region needs skilled mechanical workers, and veterans need meaningful employment that values their capabilities." This additional dimension revealed Maya's deeper understanding of her own journey, not just personal redemption, but creating pathways for others facing similar challenges. The technical director role would provide professional validation, but the veteran training program represented healing of a different kind. As the evening progressed into plans and possibilities, Maya found herself experiencing an unfamiliar sensation, anticipation for a future that extended beyond the next day or week. The survival mindset that had dominated her post-military life was gradually yielding to something more expansive, a vision that encompassed not just her own stability, but contribution to a community that had recognized her value when she had forgotten it herself. Later, standing alone on the porch, watching stars emerge above snow-covered fields, Maya reflected on the extraordinary path that had led her to this moment. The blizzard that had seemed like yet another hardship in a life increasingly defined by struggle had instead delivered her to unexpected salvation, not through dramatic rescue, but through the simple dignity of having her capabilities recognized and valued. James joined her, respecting her silence while offering companionship. Together they watched the night deepen over fields that now represented not just agricultural production, but innovation and renewal. "I never thanked you properly," Maya said finally, "for stopping that day during the storm, for seeing something in me worth investing in when I had stopped seeing it myself." "We recognize something familiar," James replied. "The determination to preserve what matters despite overwhelming odds. You were fighting for your survival the same way we were, fighting for this farm." Maya nodded, understanding the parallel. Different battlefields, same spirit. "And now," James added, "the same future." The simplicity of this statement encompassed everything that had transformed in Maya's life since the day James had found her walking through a blizzard. The road that had been leading nowhere now had direction and purpose. The skills that civilian society had overlooked had become the foundation for community-wide innovation, and the woman, who had been surviving in isolation, had found belonging in the most unexpected place. A struggling family farm that had recognized in her the same resilience they cultivated in their fields. As they stood together in comfortable silence, Maya allowed herself to fully acknowledge what had been gradually forming within her over these weeks, a sense of home. Spring arrived in Meadow Valley with the gradual transformation that farmers had celebrated for generations. Melting snowbanks, revealing patches of earth, the first green shoots emerging in fields dormant through the long winter, and the steadily warming air carrying promise of renewal. This year, however, the seasonal awakening carried deeper significance. Throughout the valley, farms that had faced extinction were implementing water conservation systems that offered not just survival, but sustainable prosperity. 6 months had passed since Maya Johnson's roadside repair had unexpectedly altered the trajectory of the Cooper farm, and by extension, the entire agricultural community. What had begun as emergency shelter during a blizzard had evolved into partnerships and innovations that rippled far beyond anyone's initial expectations. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Cooper farm as Maya stood at the edge of the south field, surveying the newly installed sensor arrays that monitored soil moisture levels with precision previously available only to large corporate operations. The equipment, developed through collaboration between her practical designs and GreenCorp's technical resources, represented the perfect synthesis of military efficiency and agricultural wisdom. "Systems showing optimal distribution patterns," she noted to James, who approached with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. "The adjusted pressure valves are performing exactly as predicted." He handed her a mug, their fingers briefly touching in the casual familiarity that had developed between them. "The Hendersons are reporting similar results on their implementation. Bill says their projected water usage is down nearly 45% from last spring." Maya nodded with professional satisfaction. The data validated what she had envisioned during those initial days working on the Cooper farm, that principles developed for military resource management in hostile environments could transform agricultural practices in drought-affected regions. The transformation extended beyond technical systems. Maya herself had undergone a remarkable evolution from the guarded, transient veteran James had discovered walking through a blizzard. The woman who now directed the Meadow Valley Agricultural Innovation Center moved with the confidence of someone who had reclaimed not just professional purpose, but personal belonging. "The first training cohort arrives next week," Maya reminded him, referring to the veteran reintegration program she had established as part of her agreement with GreenCorp. 6 former service members with mechanical backgrounds, all struggling with civilian transition. "The equipment barn is ready," James confirmed. Thomas and Emma finished setting up the training stations yesterday. The mention of Emma brought a smile to Maya's face. The teenager had become her most dedicated apprentice, absorbing both technical knowledge and leadership principles with remarkable aptitude. Their connection had grown from cautious curiosity to genuine mentorship, filling gaps in both their lives. Emma finding guidance for her mechanical inclinations, Maya discovering the satisfaction of passing hard-earned wisdom to the next generation. Emma asked if she could help with the orientation, Maya mentioned. She's drafted a pretty impressive introduction to the valley's agricultural systems. She admires you, James said simply. We all do. What you've built here in 6 months, most people couldn't accomplish in years. Maya's expression remained characteristically measured, but James had learned to recognize the subtle indicators of emotion she had been trained to control. The slight straightening of her posture that acknowledged the compliment while deflecting personal credit. It's been a community achievement, she replied. My designs would have remained theoretical without farmers willing to implement them and GreenCorp providing resources for scale. This balanced perspective, acknowledging her contributions, while recognizing the collaborative nature of their success, reflected Maya's growth. The woman who had once been invisible even to herself now stood firmly at the intersection of military precision, agricultural tradition, and corporate innovation, creating connections that benefited all three worlds. As they walked back toward the farmhouse, the distinctive sound of helicopter rotors approached from the direction of town. The aircraft that had once represented corporate threat now signified partnership, making regular flights to transport technical teams and monitor implementation progress across participating farms. Victor Reynolds had evolved from acquisition-focused CEO to champion of the Meadow Valley model, recognizing both the business advantages and public relations value of supporting sustainable family farming. His initial interest in Maya's innovations had expanded into genuine respect for her capabilities, demonstrated through substantial investment in the programs she directed. The helicopter touched down in the designated landing area, once an unused field, now a properly maintained helipad serving the Innovation Center's operations. Dr. Sarah Chen emerged, carrying equipment cases and accompanied by 2 technical specialists. The GreenCorp scientist had become a frequent visitor and Maya's closest professional colleague, their complementary approaches creating breakthroughs neither could have achieved independently. Maya, Dr. Chen called, striding toward them with characteristic energy. The satellite data from last week's moisture mapping is extraordinary. The efficiency patterns are exceeding even our most optimistic projections. As the women launched into technical discussion, James marveled at the transformation of his family's property. The Cooper farm had evolved from struggling operation to centerpiece of agricultural innovation, hosting regular visits from corporate executives, government officials, and agricultural specialists studying the Meadow Valley model for potential implementation in other regions. The farmhouse kitchen, once the site of grim discussions about foreclosure, now served as an informal conference room where multi-million-dollar decisions were made with the same practical straightforwardness that had characterized Cooper family. Meetings for generations. Thomas had embraced this evolution with characteristic adaptability, his lifetime of agricultural knowledge providing essential guidance that balanced corporate efficiency with farming reality. By midday, the farm was bustling with activity. A group of neighboring farmers arrived for scheduled training on sensor calibration, gathering in the converted equipment barn that now housed state-of-the-art demonstration systems alongside traditional farm machinery. Maya moved through these sessions with natural authority, her technical explanations precise yet accessible, connecting complex engineering principles to practical applications. Emma assisted with confidence beyond her 16 years, demonstrating procedures she had mastered under Maya's guidance. The hesitant teenager, uncertain about her future, had blossomed into a young woman with clear direction, already discussing agricultural engineering programs for her eventual college applications. "Ms. Johnson," called Bill Henderson as the training session concluded, "my son's unit is being discharged next month. He's been following what you've developed here and is interested in your veteran program. Would it be appropriate for him to apply?" Maya's expression warmed slightly at the question.
Absolutely.
"We're particularly interested in veterans with both mechanical aptitude and agricultural background. Have him contact me directly." This integration of her military past with her agricultural present represented healing that extended beyond professional accomplishment. Maya had created pathways for other veterans to navigate the civilian transition that had once nearly destroyed her, transforming personal trauma into community benefit. As afternoon progressed into evening and the various visitors departed, the core group gathered in the farmhouse: the Cooper family, Maya, Dr. Chen, and Rebecca Winters, who had transitioned from GreenCorp's acquisition manager to community liaison for the Meadow Valley project. The Regional Agricultural Commission is requesting a formal presentation next month, Rebecca announced, reviewing notes on her tablet. They're considering recommending the Meadow Valley model for drought-affected counties throughout the state. Governor's office called yesterday, Thomas added. They're sending a representative to discuss potential state funding for expanding the veteran training program. Maya listened to these developments with the measured assessment of someone who evaluated success through impact rather than accolades. The systems she had developed were functioning as designed, the implementation was proceeding according to plan, and the community benefits were becoming increasingly tangible. That was what mattered. Measurable results rather than recognition. After dinner, as the others continued discussing expansion strategies, Maya stepped outside to the porch where she had once contemplated her uncertain future. The evening air carried the scent of spring soil and new growth, the agricultural cycle beginning again with renewed promise. James joined her, their shoulders nearly touching as they leaned against the railing. "Penny, for your thoughts?" he asked. Maya considered the question with characteristic thoroughness. "I was thinking about the night you found me on the road," she said finally. "How close I came to declining your offer of help." "Really?" James hadn't known this detail. She nodded. "Years of transience teach you wariness. Accepting help means accepting visibility, vulnerability. For a moment, I almost kept walking." "What changed your mind?" Maya smiled slightly. "The storm was getting worse, and you had kind eyes. Sometimes survival calculations are that simple." The simplicity of this admission belied its significance. The former Marine, who had maintained rigid self-sufficiency, had learned to recognize kindness as essential rather than threatening. Perhaps the most profound transformation of her journey. "I'm glad you made that calculation," James said quietly. Their relationship had evolved with the deliberate pace Maya needed, friendship deepening into something more complex, yet unrushed. The woman who had been in constant motion for years was allowing herself to root gradually, testing the stability of each connection before committing further. "There's something I've been meaning to show you," Maya said suddenly. "Something I retrieved from my car when I finally emptied it last month." She led him to the small cabin at the edge of the property that now served as her residence. A structure that had once been a storage building before the Cooper family renovated it as part of her employment arrangement with GreenCorp. The space reflected Maya's precise nature, functional, organized, but with unexpected touches of beauty in carefully placed photographs and handcrafted items. From a metal case secured in her closet, Maya removed a worn leather portfolio. "This traveled with me throughout my transient years," she explained, opening it carefully. "The only personal items I never considered abandoning, even when I sold almost everything else." Inside were her military commendations, service medals, certificates of achievement, and letters of recognition from commanding officers. Each document testified to exceptional service, often conducted under extreme conditions, painting a picture of the leader she had been before civilian transition challenges had eroded her confidence. "Naval Achievement Medal with Combat V," James read from one certificate, "for professional achievement in the line of duty and combat valor. Kandahar Province," Maya explained. "Our helicopter maintenance unit came under direct fire. We had to complete critical repairs while the base was being shelled." James continued examining the documents with growing amazement. "Distinguished, Flying Cross, Bronze Star. These are significant honors." "They felt significant then," Maya acknowledged. "In the military, my contributions had clear purpose and recognition. Then suddenly I was a homeless veteran whose skills apparently translated to nothing valuable in civilian life." The stark contrast between her decorated military career and subsequent struggles underscored a systemic failure Maya was now working to address through her veteran program. Her personal redemption had become a mission to create pathways for others facing similar transitions. "Why show me these now?" James asked gently. Maya considered the question with characteristic thoughtfulness. "Because tomorrow we're welcoming veterans who may be carrying similar portfolios alongside their invisible wounds. I wanted you to understand what they've accomplished before they arrived at this crossroads." The depth of this trust, sharing not just her achievements but the vulnerability behind them, represented a milestone in their relationship. The woman who had once carefully guarded every detail of her past was choosing to reveal its fullest dimensions, both triumphant and painful. "Thank you," James said simply, recognizing the significance of her disclosure. As they returned the documents to their secure case, a notification sounded on Maya's tablet. The irrigation system's monitoring program was reporting unusual pressure. Fluctuations in the northwest field. Nothing critical, but requiring attention before morning. "Want company?" James offered as she prepared to check the situation. Maya nodded, and they walked together through twilight fields now thriving under her innovative systems. The practical problem-solving that had initially connected them remained. A comfortable foundation for their evolving relationship, shared purpose creating space for deeper connection. The irrigation issue proved minor, a pressure sensor requiring recalibration, and they completed the adjustment with the efficient teamwork that had characterized their partnership from the beginning. Standing in the quiet field beneath an emerging canopy of stars, the completion of this small task carried deeper symbolism. "Sometimes I still can't believe how completely things have changed," Maya admitted. 6 months ago, I was sleeping in my car between temporary jobs, convinced I had nothing valuable to offer civilian society. And now? Now I'm directing innovation programs, designing systems implemented across dozens of farms, preparing to train veterans in sustainable agricultural mechanics. She paused, adding more softly, "and considering putting down roots for the first time since my discharge." The significance of this last statement hung in the air between them. For Maya, contemplating permanence represented profound healing, trusting, not just in her professional value, but in her capacity for belonging. "Meadow Valley would be honored to have those roots," James said, matching her seriousness. "Particularly the Cooper farm." Their return walk to the farmhouse carried new meaning, steps aligned in comfortable rhythm through fields that represented both heritage and innovation. The family legacy James had fought to preserve and the professional purpose Maya had rediscovered had become intertwined in ways neither could have anticipated during that blizzard encounter. The following morning dawned clear and cool, perfect conditions for the community gathering planned at the Innovation Center. Farmers from throughout Meadow Valley assembled to mark 6 months of implementation and share preliminary results from the conservation systems now functioning across thousands of acres. Maya stood slightly apart as people arrived, observing with quiet satisfaction the animated conversations between farmers who had once faced isolation in their individual struggles. The collaborative approach had created connections beyond technical systems, revitalizing community bonds worn thin during years of drought and corporate pressure. Emma appeared at her side, clipboard in hand. "Everything's ready in the demonstration area," she reported. "The scale models are set up and all the monitoring stations are online." Maya nodded approval, noting the teenager's professional demeanor. "Excellent work. You'll make a remarkable engineer someday." Emma's smile at this validation revealed how significantly their relationship had impacted her development. "Mom's coming today," she added. "She wants to see everything we've built." Lisa Cooper's teaching position in the neighboring county had limited her direct involvement in the farm's transformation, but recent developments had sparked reconsideration of her professional priorities. The innovation program's educational components offered potential opportunities closer to home, possibilities the family had begun exploring. As the gathering assembled in the converted barn, the contrast with the community's situation 6 months earlier was striking. Where uncertainty and resignation had prevailed, energy and optimism now animated discussions about future seasons. Farmers who had contemplated selling their heritage now planned expansions and improvements. Thomas Cooper opened the meeting with characteristic straightforwardness. "6 months ago, most of us were counting down to foreclosure or acquisition," he acknowledged. "Today, we're implementing technologies that not only preserve our operations, but position us as leaders in sustainable agriculture." Bill Henderson followed with specific data from participating farms, water usage reductions, operational cost savings, and projected yield improvements that validated the program's approach. The technical achievements were impressive, but equally significant was the restored dignity evident in the farmers' presentations. These were not desperate operators seeking corporate rescue, but innovative partners contributing to agricultural advancement. When Maya's turn came to address the gathering, she approached the podium with the same quiet confidence that had commanded respect from Marine units in combat zones. Her presentation was characteristically precise, detailing system performance, metrics, implementation milestones, and development priorities for the coming season. The conservation technologies functioning across Meadow Valley represent more than mechanical innovations, she concluded. They demonstrate what becomes possible when specialized knowledge meets practical wisdom, when corporate resources support community resilience, and when we recognize that sustainable success requires collaborative rather than competitive approaches. The applause that followed acknowledged more than technical achievement. It celebrated the community's reclaimed agency and Maya's instrumental role in facilitating that transformation. The homeless veteran who had once walked invisible through civilian society now stood at the center of regional agricultural innovation, her capabilities not just recognized but revered. As the formal presentations concluded and participants moved through demonstration stations, a black SUV with government plates arrived outside. An aide from the governor's office emerged, accompanied by 2 military officers in formal uniform. AA development not included in the day's scheduled activities. The officials requested a private meeting with Maya, creating a momentary ripple of concern among those who had come to care for her. James watched her face register. Surprise followed, by careful neutrality, as she led the visitors to the farmhouse kitchen for privacy. 20 minutes later, when Maya emerged from this unexpected meeting, her expression revealed little to most observers. But James, who had learned to read the subtle indicators of her emotional state, recognized significant impact in her measured movements and slightly elevated posture. "Everything okay?" he asked quietly when they had a moment apart from the ongoing demonstrations. "The governor's office is expanding funding for the veteran agricultural program," she explained, her voice carrying controlled emotion. "They want to establish training centers in 3 additional counties using our Meadow Valley model." "That's excellent news," James affirmed, sensing there was more. Maya nodded, then added with careful precision, "The military representatives were from Marine Corps headquarters. They've been tracking the program's development and are interested in establishing formal transition pathways for service members with relevant experience." The significance of this development extended beyond program expansion. For Maya, it represented extraordinary validation. Her innovative approach to veteran reintegration, formally recognized by the very institution whose training had shaped her capabilities. "They also delivered this," she continued, removing an official envelope from her pocket, "a long overdue correction to my discharge status and benefits evaluation." The matter-of-fact statement belied its profound importance. The revised status would address administrative errors that had complicated Maya's transition, providing both practical benefits and formal acknowledgement of her exemplary service. "Maya, that's—" James began, understanding how deeply this recognition would affect her. "Validation," she completed simply, "not just of my military service, but of everything that's developed since." This formal recognition from both government and military institutions marked another milestone in Maya's reintegration journey. The system she had created at the Cooper farm had expanded beyond agricultural innovation to address the very transition challenges that had nearly destroyed her own civilian life. As the community gathering continued through the afternoon, Maya moved through demonstrations and discussions with characteristic focus. Her newfound status known only to James and later the Cooper family. Her commitment had never been driven by external recognition, but this validation reinforced the legitimacy of paths she was creating for others. By evening, as participants departed with implementation plans and technical specifications for their own operations, the core group gathered once more in the farmhouse kitchen, the space where their unlikely partnership had first taken shape during a blizzard 6 months earlier. To think this all started because a Marine's car broke down and a farmer stopped to help, Thomas reflected, his weathered face relaxed with satisfaction rarely displayed during the years of struggle. "Actually," Maya corrected with unexpected lightness, "I was walking, not driving. My car had broken down about 10 miles back and I couldn't afford the repair." This revelation, that her circumstances had been even more desperate than they had realized, underscored the extraordinary distance traveled since that winter day. The woman who had been walking alone through a blizzard, possessions reduced to what she could carry, now directed innovative programs with multi-million-dollar budgets and statewide implementation. "Well, I'm grateful you were walking precisely when and where you were," James said, the simple statement encompassing the profound appreciation they all felt for her presence in their lives. As evening deepened and conversation continued, Maya found herself experiencing an emotion long unfamiliar before her time in Meadow Valley: contentment. The hypervigilance that had characterized her post-military years had gradually yielded to something approaching peace. Not the absence of challenges, but confidence in her capacity to address them with support rather than isolation. Later, as the household settled for the night, Maya stepped onto the porch where significant conversations had unfolded throughout her time at the Cooper farm. The spring evening carried agricultural scents of newly turned soil and emerging crops, the landscape no longer threatening in its vastness, but comforting in its familiarity. James joined her, their shoulders touching lightly as they gazed across fields, now implementing systems they had developed together. "Big day tomorrow," he noted, referring to the arrival of their first veteran cohort. Maya nodded, her expression thoughtful. "When I was at my lowest point, sleeping in my car, taking whatever temporary work I could find, what I missed most wasn't comfort or security. It was purpose. The sense that my skills and experience mattered to anyone beyond myself." "Damn, and now you're creating that purpose for others," James observed. "Full circle," Maya agreed. "Though I never imagined the path would lead through a blizzard in Meadow Valley." This acknowledgement of life's unexpected trajectories reflected her evolving perspective. The Marine who had once planned operations with military precision had learned to navigate uncertainty with greater flexibility, recognizing opportunity in circumstances that once would have registered only as obstacles. "I've been thinking about the cabin," she said after a comfortable silence, "about making it more permanent." James turned slightly toward her, recognizing the significance of this statement. The cabin at the edge of the Cooper property had been established as temporary housing during her initial contract. Making it permanent represented commitment beyond professional arrangement, choosing Meadow Valley not just as workplace, but as home. "Any changes you want to make, consider it yours to transform," he offered. "You've certainly earned that, and more." Maya's smile in response carried rare openness. "I was thinking a small workshop addition, something suitable for continuing development work while training others." The practical nature of this proposed modification was characteristically Maya, function-driving form, purpose-informing design. Yet the long-term planning it represented signified profound healing for someone who had lived day-to-day for years. "I'd be happy to help with the construction," James offered. "Though I suspect between your engineering skills and Emma's enthusiasm, my role might be limited to general labor." "Partnership has its merits," Maya replied, the simple statement carrying multiple layers of meaning between them. As night settled fully over Meadow Valley, stars emerging in brilliant clarity above fields now thriving under innovative systems, Maya Johnson allowed herself to fully embrace what had been gradually forming during these transformative months. Not just professional purpose or community connection, but the deeper belonging of having found her place in the world. The homeless veteran who had once walked invisible through civilian society now stood firmly grounded, her military expertise valued, her innovations implemented across an agricultural community, her leadership guiding others through transitions. She had navigated alone. The road that had seemed to lead nowhere had delivered her precisely where she needed to be, though neither she nor the farmer who stopped to help could have possibly imagined the destination. Tomorrow would bring new veterans to the training program. Men and women standing where she had stood, between military structure and civilian uncertainty, carrying valuable skills often overlooked by conventional employment paths. Maya would welcome them with the hard-earned wisdom of someone who had traversed that difficult terrain and emerged not just intact, but renewed. The Cooper farm that had faced foreclosure now showcased agricultural innovation recognized at state and national levels. The family legacy that had nearly ended now extended into new dimensions, preserving tradition while embracing necessary evolution. And the chance encounter during a blizzard had expanded into concentric circles of transformation, affecting not just individual lives, but entire systems of agricultural practice and veteran transition. Standing beside James in the quiet spring night, Maya recognized that their partnership embodied the principle at the heart of every system she had designed. That strength emerges not from isolated components, but from their thoughtful integration, creating resilience that no single element could achieve alone. "One repair at a time," she murmured, echoing the approach that had guided her work from the beginning. "And each one matters," James affirmed, understanding exactly what she meant. Together, they watched over fields that had become the foundation for unexpected renewal, of family heritage, of community connection, and of a veteran who had found her way home through the simple act of helping fix a farmer's broken equipment during the coldest days of winter. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.